So we are recording, and I probably should mute everyone. And then you guys can unmute yourselves. Okay, you should be.
Welcome, everybody, and good evening. If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. Tonight is about making that difference, creating an impact that leads to lasting change. It's something we all have within us to do. The trick is to find something that matters to you enough to create that change. Rotary plays a vital role in changing people's lives, both those we serve and of those of us that participate in that service. Now we're being asked to become change makers. And tonight's presenters are experts at it. It is my pleasure to introduce to you one of those women, our zone director, Valerie Wafer. Valerie joined Rotary in 2005 in order to fuel her passion for making an impact that matters. Valerie was the district governor of Rotary District 7070, covering the Greater Toronto area in 2013-14. Now residing in Collingwood, her home club is the Rotary Club of Collingwood South. Valerie has continued to serve Rotary in a number of international roles. She is an international trainer, a member of the host organizing convention committee in Toronto 2018, a representative of Rotary International President, and is an elected member of the Rotary International Board for 2020 through 2022. During Valerie's tenure as a Rotarian, she has participated and led many initiatives, including a recent mission to Kosovo with Gift of Life International. She also has served as the vocational training team leader to Australia in 2010, focusing on youth mental health, a National Immunization Day in India 2012, and has traveled to Kenya and Tanzania to audit long-term Rotary Foundation grant activity. In her non-Rotary life, Valerie has a 27-year career as a restaurant owner in Toronto. The brand, Tim Hortons, it's the most recognized and iconic franchise in Canada. The Wafers operation was best known for its inclusive hiring practices and accessibility, especially in the area of employment. Valerie and her husband of 33 years, Mark, are Paul Harris Fellows, the Quest Society members, and major donors to the Rotary Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our director, Valerie Wafer.
Good evening, everyone. Melissa, thank you so much for that kind opening words and introduction. It's so great to be with you all this evening. I thought it's an amazing day to be anywhere when you're in the room with Sylvia Whitlock. So it's it's absolutely my honor to be here and listen to Sylvia as well. So, you know, I thought I would just open by talking about where we are in the DEI journey and women in Rotary, just briefly. You know, it has been 32 years since that epic Council on Legislation decision to allow women in Rotary. But we know that that wasn't the beginning of the conversation or the movement to allow women into Rotary clubs. It was decades of effort by men and women all over the Rotary world. And we can't lose sight of those that worked so hard before us. And I couldn't think of a more fitting opportunity to pause and say thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. You inspire all of us. Thank you to the Rotary Club of Duarte and its members that never gave up. They were definitely the mouse that roared. I know we're all looking forward to hearing from Sylvia. Her story is powerful. And as a trailblazer, she has enabled all women to lead and participate. And this action may possibly have saved our organization. which may not be around today without the addition of women. So the encouraging thing is the statistics of women in leadership roles in Rotary over the last 5 years is heading in the right direction. You may recall that 3 years ago, we didn't have a woman on the Rotary International Board of Directors. And today we have 6. And next year, of course, is the year we have Jennifer Jones as our president-elect. And so that means we'll have 9 women on the board. That's 9 out of 17. And if you can do the math, that's gender parity for the first time in the history of our organization. It's such an exciting time. So where are we today with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how did we get there? I get that question quite often. So everyone is aware of the work that's going on. I know you're doing some amazing work in your clubs and districts, but how did we get here? So Sylvia is going to take us back to the beginning of Women in Rotary. Why does Rotary have a DEI statement, and how did it evolve? So if we think about it, 29 years after women were admitted into Rotary, 2 Council on Resolutions were brought forward to the RI board to consider around diversity. The first one was to promote women in Rotary. And the second one was to increase the opportunity for women, young leaders, and people of different races and ethnicities to serve in leadership. So that was 2018. 2019, the legislation passed a policy to direct our organization to build a well-balanced membership that celebrates diversity, and that no club can limit membership based on gender, race, color, creed, national origin, or sexual orientation. So these resolutions that were brought to the board resulted in our DEI statement. So that brings you to where the statement was produced. So why was the DEI task force established in this past Rotary year? So as we know, in the wake of worldwide events and the rise of activism and a focus on issues around societal, racial, and environmental justice, we've heard from Rotarians and Rotaractors around the world, and they want Rotary to take a more meaningful action. And then we had a membership survey, a participant survey in 2019 that showed that the primary reason why our members leave is because of the club environment and the culture in our clubs. So the RI DEI task force is working diligently to bring our recommendations to the board by the end of this June. And we're also really encouraged that in March, the board agreed to extend this task force to the end of June 2023. But just like the Rotary Club of Duarte that roared and shifted culture, our culture of inclusion and equity will shift with clubs and districts. Because a club level groundswell of significant culture reform where everyone gets a chance to be treated fairly, where everyone gets the chance to say, I belong, and everyone says, I'm valued for who I am. And so we have an enormous power to shape those standards and to reinforce the desired behaviors we want. And, you know, you don't have to be a leader. You don't have to be a club president. You don't have to be a board member or an assistant governor. We need to bring people along on this journey of DEI as a membership organization. We are going to be stronger and more relevant to the next generation by providing equitable opportunities for all of us to serve. And that just gives me a perfect segue to introduce our key speaker who influences generations. Sylvia Whitlock is a leader. She is a humanitarian, she's an advocate, and she's also very witty and entertaining. If you haven't heard her speak, she keeps us laughing and at the same time, very humble about her role in everything that has evolved with Women in Rotary. Dr. Whitlock has a master's and a PhD in education and a BA in psychology. She was the first woman president of a Rotary club. She's a trailblazer for every woman in Rotary, for our daughters and our granddaughters. She inspires me every single time I hear her speak, and she has some great stories to tell, including her experiences visiting and supporting the Payali Girls School in India, where she, before COVID, would visit every single year, providing opportunities for education and changing lives. And I also want to wish her a happy birthday because it was her birthday last Thursday. So happy birthday, Sylvia. And before I hand it over, I want to thank District Governor Matt for asking me to introduce Sylvia, because it is an absolute honor, as I said. So join me in welcoming Sylvia, and we look forward to hearing your story.
Thank you, Valerie. I mean, we're meeting together so frequently. I don't know who's the luckier. I'm lucky to be on the program with you, and I like listening to you too. So listening to what you said tonight, you know, perfect title for my talk. I like to call my talk The Edge of Tomorrow. But what a tomorrow we have coming. What a tomorrow. You know, we have DEI because on the debacle of the George Floyd thing, we got DEI and everything else that's happening there. You know, we have a tomorrow when we expect to see coronavirus eradicated. Once we reach herd immunity, once we get everybody vaccinated, including all the people who don't want to be. And of course, my tomorrow was really the eradication of polio. You know, and it's only endemic. See, we learned the difference between endemic and pandemic. We have a pandemic coronavirus. We have an endemic polio that's only in 2 places now, Afghanistan and Pakistan, and it'll be gone. It'll be gone. It is almost on the way out. So that's it tomorrow when we're going to see polio gone, coronavirus gone, DEI functioning, a new female president, all kinds of tomorrows. It's more than 35 years, almost 35 years since the Supreme Court told Rotary that they had to accept women as members. You know, that was the first diversity that Rotary dealt with, male and female. But here we are. Okay. Many people, it's interesting that here I am 35 years later talking about this, but there are many clubs. I spoke to the young professionals the other day, and there were many people who didn't know there was a time when women couldn't be members of Rotary. They had never heard this story. So, and I'll tell you how it started. I went to work in this little city called Duarte, about, about maybe 15 miles east of Pasadena. I went to work as a school principal. And as most principals are concerned, I was concerned about the state of the community, because that's where your children are coming from when you want to know what you need to provide for your children. So I went to the superintendent, who just happened to be the president of the Rotary Club in Duarte. But I had never heard about Rotary. When I went to talk to Dick about the community, he said, "Oh, you don't have to worry about this community. We have a Rotary Club here." And I said, "So what's Rotary?" You know, that's a question a lot of people ask. It's the best kept secret in the world. You need to go out and tell everybody you know. And I'm going to tell you a couple of ways you can do that about Rotary. He said, "We have a Rotary Club and you're going to be a member of it pretty soon. And we take care of the community, so you don't need to worry about it." Well, Richard Key was the superintendent of schools, and he's the person who should be getting all the attention. Richard passed away a few years ago, more than a few years ago, maybe about 15 years ago. But wherever he is, I'm sure he sees and he hears all the attention his action brought, because it's everywhere. Well, he invited Mary Lou Elliott, who was another principal, and me to see. I went to school and learned how to say. He invited Mary Lou Elliott and I. He invited Mary Lou Elliott and me to join the Rotary Club of Duarte. As I said, what I knew about Rotary then could have been loosely written on the head of a pin. I knew about Kiwanis, and this is my standard joke about Kiwanis. You know what Kiwanis means? Guys, you guys don't know? It means waiting to get into Rotary. Hey, a Kiwanian told me that joke. I didn't make that up. And the Rotary Club in Duarte, by the way, works pretty closely with the Kiwanis in Duarte. They have a lot of projects that they do together. Well, I knew about Elks. You know, they wear all those interesting hats. And I mean, I worked for the United Nations on 42nd Street. You can't walk down 42nd Street without walking into some elk. You know, and you see these beautiful hats and you say, what are those? And somebody said, oh, they're elves. And you say, oh, no. Well, we learned about elks, we learned about chiroptimus, we learned about lions because they provide eyeglasses for the kids in school. But I literally had never heard about Rotary. But I knew that in my school district, there was a struggle with Rotary because of Dick's uh, desire to have women in the club. So I'll tell you a little bit about the legal wrangling and some of the funnier and more interesting experiences I had. Duarte is a bedroom community in the San Gabriel Valley, which means everybody leaves Duarte to go to Los Angeles to work or to Pasadena, and they come home to Duarte to their bedrooms to sleep. A bedroom community. The biggest businesses in Duarte were the school district, Duarte Unified School District, and the City of Hope Hospital, a very famous cancer hospital. But here was a small club, only maybe about 15 members, trying everything it could to raise membership. And I want you to remember that membership was the issue for this club. That's not the issue that got it through the Supreme Court, but that was the issue that started this. So the year was 1976. And the superintendent of schools, as I mentioned, who deserves all the credit, he looked around his community and he saw all these manager types, principal, a reporter, a psychologist, perfect for rounding out the Rotary classification system. The best way to fill your club is to look at your classification system and see what you're missing and look for women to fill those. Or you can look for men too. Well, he saw all these women, but he thought, we don't have any women in Rotary. What's going to happen here? So he thought he'd go and he'd talk to the district governor. And I won't tell you his name because he didn't pass the full test. He told him what he wanted to do. And the district governor said, go ahead. But when you send their names into international, don't send their full names, just use their initials. Now, was that designed to deceive? That didn't pass the four-way test. But they just said, he sent in all the names. I mean, M. Elliott could have been Michael Elliott. S. Whitlock could have been Stephen Whitlock, whatever. So they all went into Rotary, and Rotary was happy with all these new initialed members until they came to celebrate with us our 25th anniversary. You know, our club was happy with the new members. Only one person resigned. He resigned because he said he could foresee the death of the club. And he was peculiarly trained to recognize death, because when he resigned, we had to look for somebody else to fill the undertaker classification, because he was our undertaker member. So the women entered wholeheartedly into the spirit of the work of Rotary. Yard sales, city picnics, breakfast with Santa Claus, breakfast with the Easter Bunny. You know, we made Thanksgiving baskets for needy families, and we made dinner for cancer survivors. But we planned the 25th anniversary, the first event, 25th anniversary. And of course, International always sends representatives to help clubs to celebrate. And so they came. The celebration was set and everything was in place. And the international representatives planned their recognition of these milestones, as they do for all club members. But at the festivities, the women were introduced to the palpable consternation of the international representatives. The buzz was obvious. The representatives returned to Evanston, and almost by return mail, they weren't mailed. Immediately after they returned, we got a note that said, came from headquarters, that said, women are not allowed in Rotary. Number two, the women need to be asked to leave. Number three, if they do not leave, the club may not call itself a Rotary Club. Right? Three things. The club took a vote, decided it wouldn't ask the women to leave. They were doing all the work. Well, instead, it asked to appeal to Valerie's group, the board of directors. And it was told it couldn't appeal to the board of directors because it was not a real Rotary Club if there were women on it. Well, okay. God, well, we can appeal to the Council on Legislation. And the council was meeting that year in Tokyo. So one member was chosen to take the issue. But it was an interesting situation because when the issue was presented, when it came up for consideration, it was not whether women should be permitted to be members, but whether the Rotary Club of Duarte had violated Rotary bylaws by inviting women as members. And of course they had, and that's what was voted on. Well, it ended up with a vote against having women as members, 1,000 to 34. There were 34 people there who thought, regardless of what the issue was, they wanted to see women members. And I met one of them the year that the convention was in Calgary. I was on a train riding to the convention center. And this gentleman and his wife were sitting across from me, and everyone was tagged. And you know how you read people's tags. And the gentleman said, Duarte, isn't that the club that invited women to join Rotary? And I smiled, this big smile, and I said, oh yeah, and here we are. And he said, you know, I was at the convention in Tokyo, and I voted for women in Rotary because I always thought they should be there. And his wife, who was sitting right next to him quietly until then, said, I didn't think so then, and I don't think so now. And I said, why? She said, because we have our men going out to Rotary meetings at night, and we don't want them meeting with women and who knows what. And I said, it's okay. It's not a social club, it's a service club. We're doing service for the community. She didn't care. She didn't want to have our mind changed. It was okay. But the issue of the women in Rotary, this wasn't the first time it had come up for council on legislation. In fact, in the 1950s, way back in Detroit, a club in India had put an item to change the bylaws about women on the agenda. It was defeated, was handily defeated, and the club didn't press it. But even more interesting, the first Rotary Constitution did not specify that Rotarians had to be men. It said just persons of good character. But that was a time when there were few women in the workaday world, especially in the management positions, which is what Rotary was recruiting. Well, because men were the ones engaging in fellowship and business activities, the bylaws just kind of evolved. They just morphed. Men of good character. If I could ask Paul Harris a question today, it would be, have intentionally excluded women? I went into the Paul Harris exhibit at the international headquarters, and I saw Paul Harris, larger than life, and I asked him the question, you have excluded women from Rotary? And he didn't say a word, not a single word. Jack Davis, who was president of Rotary International at the time, said, the unity of Rotary International was jeopardized by the unilateral move of the Duarte Club. I don't think it was, but that's what he said. And so they sent a group to Duarte and they asked us to surrender our charter. We had to surrender our charter. We gave up the charter, but Bill Brooks, who was a very smart man, said, that's okay. We don't have a charter. We can't be a Rotary Club. We'll just kind of rename ourselves the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. Rotary pin with an X over it. We became the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte. And you know what? We were the ex-Rotary Club of Duarte for 11 years. Valerie mentioned we were the mouse that roared. We have a mouse pin. See, there we are. We have a mouse pin. It used to have a Rotary icon on its back. So because we smiled at these things and we thought, well, we'll just go on. We'll see what we have to do. Well, while all this was going on in the Rotary, Rotarian attorney from a neighboring club, from the Arcadia Club, said, you know what? I bet we could take this to court. Remember what I said? We're looking for members to join a service club. That wasn't a big deal. Sanford Smith said, we'll take this case to California. And as we were preparing to take it to the California courts, we gave Rotary notice. They petitioned that the case be heard in federal court because, as it said, not all members of the board of directors are California. But you see, there had been a precedent in federal court where a New York club had been seeking exclusionary rights for private club membership. And the ruling had been favorable to them. So they wanted to piggyback on that precedent. But the federal court said, no, the case may be heard in a California. So it was first heard by the California Superior Court, which upheld the Rotary's right to expel. And we thought, we couldn't believe this. We thought it was going to be a charade. But Sanford said, I guess I need to do some work on this. So with the help of the ACLU, who saw this immediately as a civil rights issue, I mean, we're talking membership, this is a civil rights issue, women having the same rights as men. And so with the help of the ACLU, they did some research and discovered that California had a law, as do most states, that ban discrimination in public accommodations. And Rotary, because of its classification system and the fact that 80% of its members have their dues paid by their employers, this was a public accommodation. So using in California, that's called the UNRU Act. In your state, it may be called something else. So Sanford appealed the Court of Appellate, the appellate court in California, using the UNRU Act. And he argued that the club should not be expelled. And the appellate court agreed with him. And so the Superior Court's ruling was reversed. That was just a small success. Small success, because immediately Rotary appealed to the California Supreme Court. But the California Supreme Court refused to hear the case, which essentially was affirming the decision of the appellate court. But remember, this is a California appellate court. And so the decision was incumbent on all California Rotary clubs, but only California. And so we moved on. But remember, before women, things changed very slowly. And this was the year that I was a president-elect, and so I was invited to attend PEPS. Our district had a good supply of postcards to invite incoming presidents to PEPS. And so there was no reason for them to change their stock. They sent me one of the postcards they sent to all the other members, the other presidents coming in. And it said, pets will be held at the Garden Grove Hilton on such and such a date. And be sure that you bring your coat and tie because director pictures will be taken. I took my coat and tie and I went. And I was the only woman there with 290 wonderful men. They really were very, very nice, very polite, very nice men. The nicest thing about that 290 men, one woman, is that during restroom breaks, there were long lines outside the men's restroom. Can you imagine? I mean, and this is 30 years ago. I could just sashay past into the women's. I could sashay. But I could just sashay past into the women's restroom where there was no one but me. There was not even one female speaker. Most of the men were so at the section on Rotary International, I heard our incoming governor discuss the case and tell us that Rotary International will appeal to SCOTUS, the United States Supreme Court, and we have every reason to believe we will win. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He added in direct reference to the small size of our club. It's just the case of the mouse that roared, Valerie mentioned. Well, I took furious notes. I went back to Duarte and we made ourselves a new banner. read Rotary Club of Duarte, the mouse that roared. Right. That's it. I've done that. Once here. That was our new bank. And I said, so, and I told you we have a mouse pin. I didn't think that in 1987 someone would be appealing a case about women's membership in a service club to the United States Supreme Court. And my private opinion, not a very studied opinion, was that it was not important enough to be heard. That's because I was not looking at the civil rights aspect. Well, I did appeal because as one of their attorneys so commonly put it, they're forcing us to take everyone in just like a motel. Imagine if they talked about us. Well, our argument was that the ruling violated their First Amendment right of association. But the Supreme Court, in its wisdom, did take the issue. And on May the 4th, 1987, the court found that considering the size, purpose, selectivity, and exclusivity of Rotary's membership, the relationship among the club's members was not of the intimate or private variety which warrants First Amendment. Writing for the unanimous court, and by the way, Sandra Day O'Connor didn't vote because her husband was a Rotarian. Justice Powell was writing the opinion, and he argued that many of Rotary's activities, including their meetings, are conducted in the presence of strangers. And because women members would not prevent the club from carrying out its purposes, there was no violation of associational rights. Furthermore, this is the big furthermore, he said, even if there were a slight encroachment on the rights of Rotarians to associate, that minimal infringement would be justified since it serves the state's compelling interest in ending sexual discrimination, gender discrimination. And so there it was. The decision was now incumbent on all USA. So it was early morning. The decision was announced on the East Coast, and we're in California on the West Coast. I'm driving to my job as principal, and the news came on. And I couldn't believe it because it was only 4 months after the Supreme Court. By the time I got to school, it only took me about 20 minutes to drive down the freeway to get there. By the time I got to school, about 20 minutes later, I think all the media in the world were out front. So were all the kids wondering, what's with all the television cameras? What's going on here? Well, Mary Lou Elliott and I were invited to be interviewed by CBS newscaster Warren Only. Some of you may remember Warren. I think he broadcasted over NPR. Well, he was doing the network broadcast. And so our superintendent said, I think you ladies need to come to the district office so school can go on. So we left school and we went to the district office and sat in the boardroom with Warren Only and the other people who were interested. And I was asked many, many questions to which I gave studied, I thought, and intelligent answers. But near the end of the interview, in fact, we were already in our feet. We were there for maybe some 3-4 hours. I was asked how I got selected to be president. And you don't ask a Rotarian that question. Maybe you can ask them today. But when it was asked, then I gave the stupid answer I can't believe I gave. Standard response from Rotarians is, oh, I don't know. I must have missed a meeting. Cannot believe to this day that I said. And that evening, he had 4 hours of copy. But that evening, the story was the top of the news, the first item on the news, including my inane and embarrassing response. Oh, I don't know. I must have missed the meeting. And here's the whole world sitting out there saying, for 11 years, we waited to hear this. Remember, this was 11 years through the court. We waited to hear this. Well, I started to learn then of the capriciousness of the media, and I knew I was going to have to adopt a more serious mode. And I do accept what I'm talking. So back at the club, we had to move our meeting place because we couldn't accommodate the press and the visitors who were ever so curious. I learned how to be circumspect in any and all answers that I would give about this case. This is also my year as incoming president, and I had to set one of the goals we had set, which included polio plus. Sorry, excuse me, my phone. Sorry about that. All right. Uh, we uh, we had some interesting telephone calls, including one that asked if the food were any better now that there were women in Rotary. Some were less pleasant. We had some DEI calls. We had one that said, now that you have women in Rotary, you're going to have black people in Rotary. And I said, actually, we kill those two birds with one stone. We have a black woman. We didn't get a welcome back from Rotary International, but we did get a new due schedule, so we knew they knew we were back. And of course, in 1989, 2 years later, following an impassioned speech by Frank Devlin, the Council on Legislation voted to accept women members into the. It was not until April 2004, 17 years later, that the Rotary printed several articles about women in Rotary. And then I was at the centerfold. I was fully dressed. I was wearing a black turtleneck, which is what I was advised to wear when the photographer came. Rotary has removed finally the last vestiges of sexism, so that now they profit most instead of the best. And even more new, a club may not be chartered, although we have some challenges now. A club may not be chartered unless its membership is open to both men and women. Open, operative women is open, men and women. This didn't start as a women's issue, but it's a simple attempt to recruit more members into Rotary. How successful has that been? Valerie told me some of the moves toward giving parity to women in different areas. For 25 years, 30 years now, we've had men and women in Rotary. Maybe about 32% of the Rotarians in the United States are women. Around the world, it's probably about maybe 25%. Okay, so that was the beginning of my journey through the humanitarian organization that is Rotary. The realization of the opportunity to serve in an ever-shrinking world. The opportunity to meet men and women who can see and articulate a need and its solution, no matter how difficult the way or how meager resources. Past RI President Maggiarbi said, women serve alongside men in every segment of life, in education, in medicine, in warehouses, and in construction. Why not in Rotary? I was in an incredibly fortunate place when all this happened because it has brought such bounty into my life. And I have served my district in many positions, including the district governor position. I've had the pleasure of talking to countless clubs here and overseas who are all fascinated by the story. And I've made up in many clubs in other countries. My small club went on to sink water wells in Jos, Nigeria, to establish an AIDS clinic in Jamaica, and to support an orphanage in Mexico. We've gone on NIDS campaigns because, especially in India, which is having such a hard time now, there's very little that compares with the feeling that through Rotary, you may have saved the life of that child into whose mouth you placed those inoculating drops and contributed to the eradication of a dread disease. And all of these activities are done with the help of the Rotary Foundation, which provides the backbone of the humanitarian work that we do. When I was, I think, district governor elect, I read a book called. It was written by. Oh, I can't remember this. I read a book about the victimization of women in the world, including right here in these United States. And I wanted to know what I could do. It was called Half the World, and it was based on a Chinese proverb that says, women hold up half the world. And what this writer said was, educate girls. That's what you need to do. You can educate them out of being victims. And so I looked around at the time to see who I could talk with about it. And I talked to our past district governor, and he said, talk to people willing in. But she's interested in starting a school for girls in India. And so I talked to Deepa, and we got all the information on this school. She wanted to start in this little village called Piali, or maybe about 30 miles from Calcutta in India. And the year that I was district governor, we raised $90,000 and helped Deepa to build a state-of-the-art school in Piali. The kids had started meeting in little buildings in this little village that all it had going for it at the time was a water well that the Rotary Club of Calcutta Metropolitan had sunk for that little village. The, the Rotarians in Calcutta provided meals for the kids, uh, raised a lot of money to pay for teachers, and the girls, 11-year-old girls who had never been to school before, started going to school in Piali. And we raised the money, enough money for them to build a 4-story school building. I encourage you to go to paceuniversal.com, P-A-C-E, universal.com, and look at the pictures of that building, and look at the pictures of the girls, and look at the stories about the girls, and see what is going on. They had to negotiate with the town fathers to get a dish so they could have computer at the school. They the school has hot and cold running water, flush toilets. We had to teach the girls how to use flush toilets. There are now 200 girls from preschool through about grade 8, and they're doing well in their senior Cambridge exams, attending that school. They're home now for the summer because Italy is going through, India is going through a resurgence of the coronavirus problem that it had so quickly addressed in the beginning, and now it's going through a real problem again. So they need your help. So you talk to your clubs about what you can do to help those clubs in India as they work to take care of the problems now with the resurgence. Well, we have a school. I go every year because I work with the teachers. I'm an educator. And I go and I work with the teachers. I help them learn how to teach. And I try to do what I can to help them as they go through their program, youngsters. In India, I meet Rotarians. I met Rotarians in India doing service about self as a creed by which they live daily. They give not just of their money, but of themselves. You should see what I'm interested in rotoplas, all of that stuff. I'm interested in living out my grandmother's creed. She taught me well. She never heard the word service above self, but the example she set me in a careful, caring, thoughtful way shaped my life. Our core value is service above self. That didn't operate the year we tried. That year self above service. But our core value is service above self. And our goal has been peace through service. And I do believe that until we meet the needs of people for food, clothing, shelter, clean water, and healthcare, education, good environment, and all the basics, there's no place in which they can receive and absorb respect the concept of peace. So, education for girls and all of this. Martin Luther King said, remind yourself each day, ask yourself each day, what have I done to help someone? We are citizens of the world, where every action, however remote or seemingly far removed, has a ripple effect. Listen to the news from around the world and look at the effect that it has on us. And remember, what have I done this day to help? Much is given, much is expected. When we give, even if it's 3 times a day, as I suggested to people the year I was governor, for Rotary Foundation, 3 times a day will take care of a lot of things. Attracting members to help us do good work is the key. We wear Rotary pins as ID pins. But can anyone noticing your pin tell that it says Rotary International? And And if they can, do they know what Rotary International is? When I fly, and I used to fly a lot, mostly in airplanes, a good way to attract somebody's attention was to drop the pin on the floor in front of you. Well, unless you're a contortionist, it's 5 feet long, or a Rotarian on a mission, it's almost impossible to retrieve your pin. You ever try to pick up anything off the floor in front of you on the plane? Well, now if somebody in the seat next to you would make a good Rotarian, he will also help you get your pin. And in the process, he'll say, what is so important? We'll stop and explain what is so important about the pin and what Rotary represents. And in so doing, you've told at least one more person. You find out what his connections are and send them. Give him the little brochure that says, what is Rotary? Or give him your elevator speech. Write it tonight if you don't have one. Right after you take off your Rotary pin and put it on your pajamas. Yes. Explain to the person sleeping next to you how important you think Rotary is. And the next day around the water cooler or the coffee machine, I bet they will laugh about you wearing your pin to bed. And that person will say, Rotary? What is Rotary? The bottom line is a few more people who have heard about Rotary and may be attracted to membership. So I'm a Rotarian who, with other Rotarians in this ever-shrinking world, work to make it a happier place, cleaner, more self-sustaining, and more peaceful than it came into. I will support the fact that Rotary functions on the edge of tomorrow, a tomorrow into which we can just catapult aimlessly, or carefully negotiate. Just as the time was right in the 70s for women in Rotary, it's nice right now for young people to be included in Rotary, new generations, with all their energy and skill. Fine men and women of character in service above self will know that they profit, serve the best, and they will wholeheartedly engage. Thank you. I will answer any questions. Does anyone have any questions?
Please feel free to unmute if you have any questions for Sylvia, or you can type them in the chat box and
I will tell you the question that I most often ask is, did we ever consider giving up while we were working, while we were waiting these 11 years? No, because we did what Rotarians do. We didn't have the Rotary badge, we couldn't do international projects, but we did everything for the community that we did as Rotarians, and we just waited it out. We figured it'll get through, and if it doesn't get through, we'll continue to do the good work we learned to do as Rotarians anyway. And of course, the good Supreme get us.
Mrs. Whitlock, I don't have a question, but I just want to say that was one of the most engaging and informative presentations I have heard in a long, long, long time. And when Mrs. Wafer introduced you and talked about how she loves to hear you speak because you have her laughing and everything else, you do all of that and more. It was, oh my God, I enjoyed this so, so very much. And so thank you so much. Don't have a question, but I wanted to say that.
It was a nice story. It's a nice story, so it's easy to tell.
Well, and you tell them very well.
And the end justifies the means, maybe. But it was a good end. Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for having me come and talk to you. And thank you, Valerie. And thank you, all the people who arranged this and made sure I could hook up today, could link up with you. We will see you around the campus.
Nobody has a question?
heard somebody say something.
Sylvia,
Yes,
do you remember Herb Pigman, who was general secretary?
well, yes.
Well, Herb retired to Warren County, Indiana, and he was my face of Rotary. And he told the story, just as you have, the evening that his wife Betty was inducted into the Boswell Rotary Club.
Yes, I know. He was a little dear. Yes. Okay. I have not met any, you know, I have not met anyone who could explain to me what was going on through all those years that Rotary was objecting to having women. Nobody could explain to me what the reasoning was around it. I have never been able to figure it out. Maybe Val will be able to get that and find out.
Sylvia, I just want to thank you. As you know, I've been very persistent with you over the last
I know.
several months. And I can't thank you enough for everything you've done. And I just wanted everybody to hear your story. So thank you again.
Well, thank you for asking me. I'm thrilled that people like to hear the story because it's a nice story. And it ends up right. Okay, we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. This was great. Thank you, Valerie, for joining us tonight and introducing Sylvia also. I think our multi-district events are becoming very successful, so we're always glad that you can join us.
So I think the takeaway, right, is persistence pays off, and Sylvia's right? We're Rotarians, we don't give up.
Absolutely.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sharing your evening with us. If you have any ideas for future speakers, you can reach out to Assistant Rotary Coordinator Scott or any of the district membership chairs. We always want to be able to find new speakers and things that are interesting and ways to grow Rotary. Enjoy your night.
Invite Bowtie Jenkins.
Oh, we've seen Bowtie. Oh my God, he's wonderful.
Yes. And thank you for kicking us off tonight, Melissa.
Always. Thank you. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night, everyone.
everybody. Have a good night.